Hello everyone, I am the Medic Kirby, and welcome to my channel, The Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews under the deck text. On this episode of The Brewery, I'll be discussing my take on a Commander background pairing from Baldur's Gate, Abdel Adrian, Agent of the Iron Throne. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel. The best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. For just $1, patrons get early access to certain videos on YouTube. In fact, patrons got a chance to see this video earlier. You can also support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. I put out a video every Monday, so you don't want to miss out. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Abdel is a 4/4 human warrior with choose a background for 4 generic and 1 white. He has an enter the battlefield trigger, allowing you to exile any number of other non-land permanents you control until he leaves the battlefield. While this in and of itself is a very powerful ability, he creates a 1/1 soldier token for each permanent exiled this way. Not only does this make Abdel an amazing commander with multiple ways to build around, but being able to choose his background can add not just potentially another color to his identity, but another ability altogether. To make the most of Abdel's Mass Oblivion Ring type effect, I chose Agent of the Iron Throne as his background. This gives Abdel a very powerful effect, which is to make the most out of the tokens he's creating. And by making the most of, I mean sacrificing them for either value or to simply kill off the table with 1,000 cuts. However, as I just mentioned, there are plenty of other amazing backgrounds to pair with Abdel, particularly some blue ones. But if you want to see how I made the most of this combination in the command zone, keep watching. First off, I feel like this pairing has some CEDH potential if you build a very stacksy build with plenty of control elements until you draw or tutor into the game ending combo and win that way. While this video is not presenting a CEDH build, I should address the elephant in the room, and that is Animate Dead. This is enough to go infinite with the 2 cards readily available right in the command zone. Let's go over quickly how they work, and then we'll see the other infinite engines in the deck. Again, you can build Abdel however you want. These engines can be used without necessarily going to infinity since the synergy is super strong. But while Animate Dead is still an amazing card on its own, it's pretty much a guaranteed game over here. Let's quickly see how it works. Let's say we have our background on the battlefield, Animate Dead in our hand, and Abdel in the graveyard. When we cast Animate Dead, targeting Abdel, he's going to enter the battlefield enchanted by it. His trigger goes on the stack. When it resolves, we choose to only exile Animate Dead. However, when Animate Dead leaves the battlefield, the creature it was enchanting has to be sacrificed. Now we have 2 new triggers on the stack. Abdel's delayed trigger trying to resolve and the ability granted by the background. Abdel triggers off of himself in this case, so each opponent will lose 1 life from Abdel dying. We now resolve Abdel's delayed trigger, returning Animate Dead from exile. We're now right where we started, since we can now target Abdel with Animate Dead and start the loop all over again, thus having all opponents lose 1 life indefinitely many times until they die. So if you want to avoid the temptation of this winning loop, you can choose to omit Animate Dead. You can still reach infinity with a bit more work if a 1-card combo is too consistent for you. And these are cards that synergize with what Abdel's doing anyways, so you can choose to not go infinite with them. These being Faceless Butcher, Lumbering Battlement, Fiend Hunter, Journey to Nowhere, Oblivion Ring, and Touch the Spirit Well. These all have an effect similar to Abdel and can be used as such for some spicy interactions like blinking something multiple times by blinking something else that blinks it. Yes, that was a bit confusing and almost a tongue twister. So let's see an example of how this works by just using any of these 2 cards in conjunction with Abdel. Let's say we have Abdel on the battlefield with both Faceless Butcher and Fiend Hunter in our hand. We cast Faceless Butcher targeting Abdel when it enters the battlefield. Anything exiled by Abdel will return to the battlefield, thus giving us the value of those enter the battlefield triggers they might have triggering once more. However, let's take it a step further. Let's cast Fiend Hunter targeting Faceless Butcher when it enters the battlefield. Faceless Butcher getting exiled returns Abdel from exile. With Abdel's enter the battlefield trigger, we can once more exile any of those value ETB trigger permanents with him. But more importantly, we're going to also exile Fiend Hunter. Doing so returns Faceless Butcher from exile. And, you guessed it, we're back where we started. Not only will this give us infinitely many 1/1 soldier tokens, but infinite ETB triggers from the permanents constantly imprisoned by Abdel. It's worth noting that this combo also works with Parallax Wave. Any prison permanent exiled by Abdel will return when we remove a fade counter from Parallax Wave to exile Abdel. That permanent will exile Parallax Wave, returning Abdel. So this could work with the previously mentioned Oblivion Ring, for example. How do we win with just this though? Well, if our infinite soldier army makes it a full turn around the board, it's game over. However, that's a bit of wishful thinking. but we can still win our own turn once we get the engine going. There's a ton of different ways to go about it too, so it depends on how you want to win. As for me, I included a couple of win cons that work well with the deck's synergy, as well as providing an instant win when going infinite. Viscera Seer, Sadistic Hypnotist, Altar of Dementia, Ashnet's Altar, and Phyrexian Altar are some free sacrifice outlets that are not only amazing on their own, but will win us the game once we have Abdel creating infinitely many soldier tokens. Not only do these provide amazing effects that are beneficial for us as well as disruptive for opponents, but keep in mind that once we're creating infinitely many soldier tokens, each time we sacrifice one, Agent of the Iron Throne will have Abdel trigger, taking 1 life away from all opponents each time. This makes the best kind of effects for the deck because they're amazing aristocrat effects that fit any of the deck's engines, but can also win us the game when it came down to it. Other win cons I have in the deck include Nadir's Nightblade and Corpse Knight. With Nadir's Nightblade on the battlefield, we can have Abdel also exile the soldier tokens he's creating when he comes back around. Each of those tokens getting exiled triggers Nadir's Nightblade, done infinitely many times and we killed off the table. However, even if we're not yet going infinite, doing it a bunch of times each turn will definitely add up. Corpse Knight does something similar but when the creature enters the battlefield under our control. So when Abdel is creating all those soldier tokens, we're taking life away from all of our opponents. Another win con I really like is Radiant Solar and White Plume Adventurer. I love the venture mechanic and I hope we get more and better cards with it. At least these two are amazing in this deck. Each time a creature enters the battlefield, Radiant Solar has us venture into the dungeon. Even if we're not going infinite, we're going to be completing dungeons in record speed. Naturally, once we are going infinite, you're going to want to venture into Lost Mine of Phandelver indefinitely many times because every time we complete it, we'd be venturing through Dark Pool, doing what we were achieving with Nadir's Nightblade. We can do something similar with just White Plume Adventurer. Again, great on its own because we take the initiative each time it enters the battlefield. And thanks to that, we can venture into Undercity. This secret dungeon has a room similar to Lost Mine of Phandelver. If we complete this dungeon indefinitely many times, venturing through Trap each time, we can kill off the entire table. Undercity is also just a great dungeon overall since its first room has us get a basic land into our hand each time we start it. Speaking of repeatedly getting basic lands, we can actually do that in a non-green deck like this one thanks to the insane blink engines in it. When you insert cards like Loyal Warhound, Knight of the White Orchid, Core Cartographer, Solemn Simulacrum, and Boreas Charger in engines that are constantly blinking creatures, we can get a ton of lands. Granted, some of these effects are limited to how many lands an opponent has, but if you're facing that green player who's only ramping, you'll definitely catch up. Fortunately, some effects like Core Cartographer and Solemn Simulacrum work independently of opponents. Walking Atlas and Terrain Generator also help out with getting more than one land per turn, assuming we have an extra land in our hand. The deck does draw into a ton of cards, so these cards are more useful than at first glance, but we'll see those cards in a bit. Yes, mono white card draw. Firstly, I can't talk about land ramp without this absolutely busted piece of cardboard, Settle the Wreckage. Abdel creates a ton of soldier tokens in this deck, even with the deck not running Anointed Procession. Even if we're just swinging in with 5 soldier tokens, we can cast Settle the Wreckage, exiling them all, and then ramping for 5 basic lands. That's already 28% of the basic lands of the deck. Imagine swinging in with even more soldier tokens. This card is ridiculous. The deck still has conventional mana acceleration though, like Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Talisman of Hierarchy, and Orzhov Signet. We still need those early turn mana rocks to be able to compete with green decks, but at least in terms of land ramp, this deck doesn't envy green at all. As for the card advantage I mentioned earlier, the deck's running Roving Harper, Sky Scanner, Spirited Companion, Wall of Omens, Inspiring Overseer, and Priest of Ancient Lore. These are pretty straightforward. They enter the battlefield, you draw a card. However, there's a bit more nuance since they're cheap and can thus be used to chump block or as sacrifice fodder in a pinch. Coming down before Abdel is obviously a huge plus. Rumor Gatherer, Whelping Wing Vampire, and Mentor of the Meek provide some more enter the battlefield triggers that have us draw cards. Rumor Gatherer and Whelping Wing Vampire can only really work once per turn though. Rumor Gatherer only draws us a card the second time its ability triggers, and the Vampire only triggers once. However, blinking them will obviously reset those counts. Rumor Gatherer is still amazing even if we don't blink it since we can still scry from its trigger. If we're scrying anywhere between 5 to 10 cards each mass blink, or when creating a ton of soldier tokens, we're essentially tutoring at that point. Mentor of the Meek requires paying 1 generic each time it triggers, but that's not that bad if we have the mana to spare. The real crime is Inspiring Commander being a digitally exclusive card when it doesn't have absolutely anything that can't be achieved in paper. When will this card be reprinted in paper? There's no need for it to be digitally exclusive, but I digress. In any case, Skull Clamp does something similar to Mentor of the Meek since we have to pay 1 generic each time to equip it. Naturally, we'd be clamping the 1/1 soldier tokens created by Abdel. but we can also equip it to a creature that can then be sacrificed in a pinch if we really need to draw cards. Reliquary Tower is included for good measure because we do draw a ton of cards. While I've mentioned in multiple videos that this land doesn't really take up a slot on the deck, especially a 2-color deck like this one, it providing colorless mana is actually a benefit, which we'll see why in a bit. While white isn't going to be making groundbreaking strides in card advantage anytime soon, at least we can make the most of what it has with other things it can excel in, like blinking, which the deck seems to make the most of. Eldrazi Displacer, one of the reasons we need colorless mana sources as I just mentioned, is such an amazing card here. We can similarly blink Abdel at will, getting all of those sweet enter the battlefield triggers from releasing the non-land permanents he imprisoned away, while also getting a ton more soldier tokens in the process. Not only that, but we can also blink potential attackers or blockers since the creature returns to the battlefield tapped. Restoration Angel, Felidar Guardian, Glorious Protector, and Wisp Weaver Angel do something similar, but they're limited to when they enter the battlefield. Fortunately, 2 of them have flash, which also helps them become protective effects. In any case, having any of these blink Abdel when he's exiled a whole bunch of stuff is such an epic play. In fact, you can have a similar interaction between these creatures and Abdel as we saw with the Oblivion Ring type effects mentioned at the beginning. Let's see a quick example. Assuming we have Abdel on the battlefield and Restoration Angel and Felidar Guardian in our hand. We cast the Angel blinking Abdel. However, when Abdel returns, he's going to also exile the Angel. We then cast the Felidar blinking Abdel when it enters the battlefield. When Abdel leaves, Restoration Angel returns, putting his trigger on the stack after Abdel returns. When Abdel returns, there are now 2 triggers on the stack. Resolve Abdel's first, exiling Felidar Guardian. Then resolve Restoration Angel's trigger, blinking Abdel. We're now in a loop that can continue so long as these are the targets being chosen to blink. This will generate infinite instances of whatever outcome we have, whether a win con, value engines, etc. Other ways we can blink Abdel is with Conjurer's Closet and Teleportation Circle. While these only trigger at the beginning of our end step, we'll get a ton of tokens as well as triggering all the things Abdel has exiled, so we're still getting a ton of value for free. Speaking of retriggering enter the battlefield triggers, Panharmonicon has to obviously be in here. Being able to double our enter the battlefield triggers is no joke. Getting twice as many ramp effects, card draw, etc. is just icing on the cake. Granted, it could be a bit win more once we have our engines online, but it's amazing value until we get there. Speaking of value, Lunarch Veteran and Moonblessed Cleric are amazing here. Lunarch Veteran serves as a way to help us gain ridiculous amounts of life. While the deck doesn't necessarily weaponize life gain, it's good to have in case you become the arch enemy. Then, if it dies, we can recast it from the graveyard as Luminous Phantom via its disturb ability. We're still gaining life in the process, but this time by creatures leaving the battlefield instead of entering. Best of all, if we want to switch it back to gaining life when creatures enter the battlefield, we can blink it so that it returns as Lunarch Veteran. Very versatile. The Cleric is super busted here though. First of all, it can top deck Animated Dead if you want to win that way. However, even if you exclude it from your list, it can still get other enchantments like the Oblivion Ring effects and some of the deck's responses, which we'll see in a bit. As for other transforming cards we can make the most of, Westvale Abbey is one of them. Granted, we have to pay 5 mana and tap it, and sacrifice 5 creatures, but keep in mind that we like sacrificing creatures here. When we do, it transforms into Ormendal Profane Prince, a 9/7 demon with some spicy keyword soup. While this might seem more cute than anything, keep in mind that even if we're dealing some damage each turn, we can still win that way before we even get to infinity if our engines are online. In any case, this is also a roundabout way of having another sacrifice outlet if we have no others. Keep in mind that Abdel can blink Ormendal even if it can't blink Westvale Abbey. And best of all, this doesn't even take up a slot on the deck. As for additional sacrifice outlets, Westvale Abbey and the free ones mentioned in the beginning aren't the only ones in the deck. Attrition and Mind Slash are included and are amazing here. Even if we do have to pay 1 black each time to activate them, the fact remains that not only are we sacrificing a creature to fuel our win cons, but we're also disrupting our opponents. These cards are absolutely backbreaking in Aristocrat decks, but even more so here with the near limitless fuel for them. Orc Sure Shot is another absolutely busted effect in the deck. Each time we blink Abdel, getting a ton of creatures and or soldier tokens entering the battlefield means being able to snipe opponents' creatures. Since it's negative toughness, it doesn't matter if they're indestructible or have regeneration. However, if we're facing Horde decks of our own, Undo Inversion, Vanquish the Horde, By Invitation Only, Hour of Reckoning, and Hour of Revelation will get the job done. Remember that we don't care if our creatures die. In fact, we welcome it. However, some of these board wipes can potentially benefit us more than harming us since they're tied to what's best for the deck. Best of all, the first one doesn't even take up a slot in the deck since its backside is a land. That being said, if the board needs wiping, go ahead and wipe it. However, if we can control the Carnage, repeatedly blinking things like Meteor Golem, Cavalier of Dawn, Angel of Despair, Skyclave Apparition, Aerial Extortionist, and Active Authority can also get the job done. Aerial Extortionist is another amazing card in the deck that can also be used as an engine piece. We can use it to exile our own Abdel in a pinch, and then just recast him from exile, blinking Aerial Extortionist when it returns, doing something similar to what we saw with the Blinking Angels. It's also a great card in general because we can draw cards whenever opponents cast cards from anywhere besides their hands. The Cavalier is also great because when it dies, we can recover an artifact or enchantment. Since plenty of our engine pieces are artifacts or enchantments, we can sacrifice this in a pinch to get them back. Speaking of recovery, Volrath's Stronghold, Hall of Julius' Generosity, and Agadeem's Awakening are some more recovery effects. The first two can be activated to top deck a pertinent card from our graveyard, and the sorcery can mass reanimate some creatures, albeit with quite the restriction. However, what's best of these cards is that they don't take up slots in the deck since they're lands. Well, Agadeem's Awakening isn't a land, but since its backside is a land that can potentially enter untapped, it doesn't take up a slot in the deck. The final interactive effects in the deck are Stonehorn Dignitary and Grand Abolisher, some amazing stacks effects. Stonehorn Dignitary can lock out an aggro player from even being a problem to us, while Grand Abolisher can prevent interactive players from disrupting our combos during our turn. Both of these effects are great because they're not entirely annoying since opponents can still play the game. They just won't be able to attack us or do anything during our turn. But anything else is okay, I guess. The rest of the deck is just the rest of the lands. The deck's running Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, Marsh Flats, Prismatic Vista, Godless Shrine, Snowfield Sinkhole, Isolated Chapel, Tainted Field, Fetid Heath, Command Tower, and Ancient Tomb, as well as 9 Plains, 8 Swamps, and 1 Waste, just in case for Eldrazi Displacer. Since Waste has the basic super type, we can fetch for it with effects that let us ramp for basics. So just one in here isn't going to color through us anytime soon. As with all of my deck techs, you can build your mana base according to your budget. Whether you include more expensive cards or even cheaper cards is up to you. You do you. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Abdel Adrian, Gorian's ward. While you can definitely pair him with absolutely any background you want, this one seems to be the best one so far and quite popular. So you can definitely find even more ideas out there for it. That being said, I decided to build mine with more focus around blink synergies as well as some aristocrat effects. If you're interested in the deck list of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of The Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am the Benedict Kirby, and happy brewing.